This issue of MBR is precisely what we call pseudoscientific theories. And there are so many like it currently happening in our schools that are purely based on pseudoscience. Hi everyone! One of the most common things that goes on in schools, especially the highly performing ones, it is something called movement by running, popularly known as MBR. It is something sold to schools by motivational speakers such as Sam Vidambu, Harry G, among others. But let's delve deep into it and see whether it makes sense or it holds any water. According to Sam Vidambu, while advising students on the top 50 things that every candidate should know before KCSE, at number 13, he advises students to avoid sluggish movement. Your brain functions as fast as your legs. First of all, ignore the misspelling on the word fast because we know exactly what he means. And let's subject that statement to some basic science and see whether it makes sense. It is the brain that controls all the functions of the body, all of them. And without getting really deep into it, because I said basic science, it is the cerebellum part of the brain that controls all the physical movement of the body, such as driving, throwing a ball, walking, and of course running. But Sam Vidambu, in an effort of trying to motivate and guide students, wants to reverse science and tell us that it is the legs that control the brain, that the faster your legs, which implies MBR, the faster your brain. But does that really make sense? An example in this case would help us. If you take 1 or 2 for the road, that alcohol goes into your brain and affects the cerebellum. And this is why a drunk person loses balance and starts making 2 steps forward and 4 steps backward. So it is the sluggish brain that makes the legs sluggish and not the sluggish legs that make the brain sluggish. Am I making sense or something? It is not the other way around. It is the brain that controls the legs and not the legs that control the brain. And you cannot reverse science, whether you're a motivational speaker or not. The other person that advocates for MBR is known as Harry G. And I still remember when he came to our school and he was quoting for us how a certain school had transformed and its performance improved, courtesy of his MBR message. But wait a moment. Of all the factors and variables that contributes towards the performance of students, such as entry behavior, school facilities like the labs and libraries, well-staffed school, revision materials, discipline, hard work of the students, and perhaps MBR. Someone wants to claim and give MBR literally more than 50% of the weight. I cannot agree with that. And again, without delving so much into that, I can tell us that the most important factor towards school's performance at 60% plus or minus 10 is the entry behavior of the students. That's a very fair estimate, which we cannot argue too much with. This leaves all the other factors with the remaining 40%, and in all fairness, MBR cannot go beyond 2%. But once again, let's consider an example. Supposing a student was to get a B in his or her final KCSE exam in a school that embraces MBR, what would that same student get in that same school if that school does not embrace MBR? With all the fairness again, the student would still get a B. But somebody may argue that MBR is not simply the act of running in the school, that it includes doing every other thing in the school faster. But that would be stretching the definition of MBR beyond its elastic limit. This issue of MBR is precisely what we call pseudoscientific theories. And there are so many like it currently happening in our schools that are purely based on pseudoscience. And I'm going to be dealing with them one by one in my future videos. The school where I studied, that is St. Anthony's Kitale Boys, must have been among the pioneers in this issue of MBR. It started when we were forced to run from the Catholic church to the school, a distance of about 1.5 kilometers, only to come and start idling in school while washing, playing some little games, basking in the sun as we waited for the 10 a.m. tea. It never made sense to me at all. I vehemently opposed it then. I still oppose it to date. Why should students run for lunch only to find a line that is from here to Timbuktu and spend the next 10, 20, 30 minutes lining up? Why were they running in the first place? Even if the students were to run from the DH towards the classes after the lunch, how many minutes can they save surely? Most schools have a distance of about 300 meters from the farthest dorm to the farthest class. Even if a student was to save 3 minutes because of running, they would still need to spend the next 3 or 5 minutes cooling themselves down and nursing the paining kahasho because of running while the stomach is full. By the way, what is the name of kahasho in English? One of the funniest things that I read while researching for this video was an experience that happened at Mary Hill Girls High School, where a parent ran scared, thinking that there was an emergency in the school because the students were running all over. Conclusively, I am a firm believer that students should not run or do any other thing just for the sake of it. And therefore, by the powers bestowed upon me by YouTube Inc., I hereby ban MBR in all the Kenyan schools. Students shall henceforth be required to run only when they are late. Thank you so much. I'm out.